Greetings, happy warriors, and thank you for being part of the Rabbi Daniel Lapin show. And before we go any further, let me ask you to subscribe. And let me thank all of you who have heeded my earlier requests to subscribe. You've done very well indeed, as I'm sure you've noticed on a number of platforms. Our subscription numbers are looking very respectable. For example, as a result of all of you who watch on YouTube going ahead and collaborating with me on subscribing, we're over 53,000 subscribers, which is terrific. So please keep that up. If you're not yet subscribed, go ahead and take care of that right now. And other than that, as usual, I welcome you to the Rabbi Daniel Lapin show, where, as you know, I solemnly dedicate myself to revealing how the world really works. So thanks for being part of the show. And as I'm sure you are aware, we also have some interesting things going on right now in terms of offers on the website. So go ahead to rabbidaniellapin.com, and I think you will be very pleased with what you see. The show today is a little unusual in that I had the opportunity to have a conversation with someone I've been looking forward to talking to for a while. As you know, I'm nostalgic about my African heritage, even though I've been gone for many years, although I did visit a little while ago. I became aware of a South African-based entrepreneur with a global reach, and somebody who speaks extensively on business education, again, internationally. And so we put out a sound at him and say, can we have a little conversation? Can we get to know one another? And fortunately, I decided to make sure that we recorded the interaction, because although there are technical difficulties, for instance, because he's in South Africa and because South Africa is suffering from major dysfunctional economic areas right now, the electricity supply keeps on going out in South Africa, and it makes it very, very difficult to conduct business. That happened in the middle of our discussion. It killed our Zoom conversation, but a few minutes later we reconnected. He has an emergency generator, and by the time they got that up running, we connected again, and all was well. And I very much enjoyed chatting with him. It was revelatory, and I know we're gonna talk some more for sure. But I thought that you might like to eavesdrop on this little conversation that we had. So I thank you very much indeed. Enjoy it, and remember, keep making progress on your 5 F's, onwards and upwards, with your family and your faith, with your finance, your friendships, and your fitness. Yeah.
So what I wanted to know was my superpower, I think, is my ability to be really curious and ask questions. And just off the back of the kind of the way you've approached your books, I just want to know, of the principles you discovered around what it is that the Jewish people are taught in the ancient text about their relationship with the world, and obviously how it manifests for us is they're good with money, but it really is they're good with a particular relationship with the world. What would be like 2 principles that in your mind just stick out?
Sure. So one of them is the integrated nature of everything, meaning that specialists fulfill a very valuable function. In running your business, you use them. In running my business, I use them. I consult when an issue comes up. I consult with our legal people, and their best advice would be for me to run no risk at all, and then I consult with the financial folks, and they're saying, but wait, we need to generate a profit, and this deal is too good to pass up. And then I speak to to our public relations experts, and they say their little thing. And at the end of the day, I am the CEO, and I have to make the decision. But I would never place a specialist in the CEO chair in any business over which I have influence. Sure. And so in terms of wisdom, in terms of understanding how the world really works, it's understanding the interaction of all these things. And so when it comes to money principles, it's very hard to isolate them entirely from marriage and family principles. And I'll give you an example of why that is. One explanation is, pardon me, that one of the things that we obviously all need in business is an ability to see into the future. That doesn't mean we can become prophets, and it doesn't mean we'll always be right, but it means that we have an ear out for the sound of the soft footsteps of approaching events. Oof. And in order to, I'm sorry?
That's good. That's really good.
And in order to heighten our sensitivity to that, we have to avoid being orphans of time. An orphan of time is what I define as somebody who lives entirely in the present, has no understanding of the past, and no connection with the future. And it's very easy to live in the present because it's tangible, and I can touch it and eat it and drink it. It's right there. But I also need to be able to watch the patterns of the past, because very often it is the structure of the past that provides me with the most reliable format to visualize the future. We know that with people. A person's track record is far more important to me than what his public relations people tell me. I got to look backwards and forwards. One of the things that really helps being forward is being around children. Now, one can say, what's that got to do with anything? And the answer is that if I ask somebody, could you please help me move this heavy bookcase? And the person says, well, I don't know, I haven't been to the gym the last 3 weeks. And I say, listen, I didn't ask for your schedule. I'm not interested in your history. I just want you to help me push the bookcase. He says, you don't understand. If I'd been at the gym regularly, I would be supple and stronger, and my muscles would be conditioned. He says, I'm not sure the things I did will have an impact on how effectively I perform now. And similarly, there is a certain spiritual sensitivity to the future that comes from being around little children. It's one of the reasons that that being in a country or being in a neighborhood, America has retirement neighborhoods. I don't know if you've ever seen such a thing, Mr. Thembekwayo. No. It's miserable. It's truly miserable. You go there and it's only elderly people. Now, I've got nothing against
the highlights of their lives.
Yes, and I've got nothing against elderly people.
Get fresh ideas from and fresh inspiration and
these retirement communities that don't allow young people and don't allow children, they reek of death.
Sure.
But if you go to, one of the reasons I like going to Israel is it's about outside of Africa, which is exactly the same. Israel is filled with kids. It regularly happens. I stand at a traffic light waiting to cross the street, and some little 5-year-old urchin sticks her hand in my hand because her mother told her don't cross the street without an adult. Never seen this kid before. She holds my hand tightly while we cross the street, and then she leaves go and runs off. There's little kids all over the place. And when I spoke in Ghana a little while ago, I had the same sense. They're young people. There's vitality and that excitement. So yes, and if I would say to, and I have said this even to young technical and financial entrepreneurs, single guys, single women, I say, listen, you want my best advice on this topic? Offer to babysit some little kids on a weekly basis. Because and if what do you say?
Why?
because it's like going to the gym. It infuses a freshness and a vitality and a sense of the future that you can't get any other way. So that that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is that you can't ever succeed. No decent person can ever succeed at any activity that deep in his heart he considers to be morally reprehensible. And so if you see making money as synonymous with taking money, and that your actions of making money have to correspond to other people losing money, if that's your vision of economics, then you are condemning yourself to perpetual financial stagnation. Because if you're a decent person, you can't do it. And that's one of the reasons I've discovered that many people are uncomfortable naming their fee or their price, because they feel bad. They feel they're taking money. So those are
adding value to the world. They think they're taking something from it.
Absolutely, they do. Yes. Yeah. So
you said that. Sorry, let me interrupt you, because I don't have any data to back this up, but I kind of intuitively want to say that there might even be a link between that kind of mindset and poverty in certain population groups. And I would even extend that to say poverty in certain nations, because if you criminalize the accumulation of wealth, it's typically because that's your understanding of wealth, is that wealth is extractive and wealth is manipulative by nature. And so if that is the case, then there's absolutely no way you're going to allow others to accumulate wealth in your society. So if you're not allowed to accumulate wealth, and wealth accumulation is criminalized, then we create this society where we're all equally miserable.
Yes.
And we're wondering why there are people on the other end of the fence who are all equally happy and all equally financially successful. And so what we begin to do is we create, the ghost of these macro factors around a certain population group being discriminatory, or a certain geography having advantage, but we create these academically sound arguments, but actually what it gets down to is quite simply that our belief system is wrong. We believe money is evil.
That is exactly right. And the evidence, you asked for evidence. The evidence is that one of the phrases that sickens me, I truly have a visceral reaction against it. You keep hearing it whenever a philanthropist makes a gift. Some commentator on television says, "Isn't it wonderful to see him giving back to society?"
As if he took away from.
You got it. Exactly. While he was making the money in the... Sorry?
I'd never thought of that.
But it's right, isn't it? If he's now giving back to society while he was making the money in the first place, he was taking from society, obviously. Hi, I'm Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Have you ever wondered what guidance the Hebrew language has for our modern world? Dive into Buried Treasure, available right now at a special discount. Readers from all walks of life have found Buried Treasure enlightening, even life-changing. Are you ready to uncover the breathtaking detail in God's message? Act now and get your copy of Buried Treasure. Don't miss out on our special discount offer.
So what you're telling me is that one of the beliefs in the community is that making money and adding value to society are not mutually exclusive. That in fact, a big part of how you add value to society is measured in your ability to make a return from the value you add to society.
I would agree with that 100%. I think you expressed it better than I do. That's exactly right.
Very, very, very powerful.
So in other words, is it important to give charity? And a lot of people will say, well, we expect it because those who have great wealth must give much. No, when you made the money in the first place, you were already giving, because nobody forced me at the point of a gun to buy your goods or to avail myself of your services. And therefore, I did those things. I bought your goods because I wanted to. They improved my life. So you were already improving everybody's lives before you give a penny away to charity.
That's so good.
So it's really important. So this
I'm curious, just lastly on this, I'm curious about, is there a value, whether perceived or real, in a community seeking to make wealth and create wealth as a community rather than the individual? That's the first question. And the second question is that a more sustainable way to create value in the long term? Or do you not have a view on that?
And so the idea is, I think, that collective activity works best by contract. Sure. So in other words, if you and I decide to go into business, we might agree that our proposed venture will be good, shall we say. Let's say we wanted to do something in Africa. It'll be good for Africa. We might decide it's even good for the world. But in the final analysis, the real question, and this is not a selfish thing at all, this is a sustainable thing. The real question is, will this be profitable to both of us? And if so, let's establish a contractual relationship that defines each of our responsibilities and defines the division of the company and of the benefits. And we have to do that because the only way to really make sure that we are helping other human beings is if they are willing to pay for it. And one of the dangers of politics is that politicians very often arrive at the arrogant presumption that they know better than individuals and better than the people they represent what is good for those people, instead of letting those people decide for themselves. And money is just this wonderful tool that allows each person to make his own voting for whatever he wants.
Absolutely, because every day when you're in the market, the customer has to vote for you by buying your product.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, the only other aspect of the question you raised is that our success is very much a function of the number of people who know us, who like us, and who trust us. And so, obviously, have I lost you at all?
Our alternative energy to kick in. So
oh my goodness, whereabout are you speaking from?
I'm in South Africa at the moment.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear about that. I've been hearing about increasing numbers of power failures.
A true testimony of what you were talking about earlier. You know, one of those things about if you think good leadership is overrated, try bad leadership, and then very quickly you'll realize the true cost of leadership, right? So South Africa sadly finds itself in the milieu of leaders whose performance is not tethered to the reality of their people, and frankly, in part, people who have not yet developed a robust relationship of accountability with their leaders. And so in this part of the world, politicians, for whatever reason, are cherished, and it's changing a bit now. It's changing a bit now, but it's not great. Anyway, that's what happened.
I'm sorry to hear it. I'm very sorry to hear it. I should probably, here we are in the middle of a fascinating conversation, briefly interrupted by a power outage, but I should at least introduce you to the audience that I'm hoping we'll be able to share this with. And I'm talking to a global business leader and well-known international speaker, Mr. Vusi Thembekwayo, who is in South Africa right now as we speak. And I'm, of course, in the United States. But I've been fascinated by your dedication to bringing sound money principles and increasing the financial capabilities of people worldwide, but notably in what we think of today as the global South. That would be a true description of your passion, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've absolutely nailed it. I am intrigued by imbalance, would probably be the best way to put it. So anything where there is no balance, it just naturally fascinates me, and I kind of step into the breach and go right into the crucible of what it is that creates that imbalance. Because I think once we understand certain imbalances at the results end, we're able to change behaviors on the input side. And we live in a world where people don't like to understand imbalances. They like to moan, to complain, to argue, but not to try and understand the imbalances. So, my quest to try and understand how value is created, how wealth is created, and how certain population groups just seem to land on their feet has been driven by this quite simple quest to really understand what drives imbalances.
And how would you encapsulate the most critical and noteworthy imbalances, shall we say, in Africa today?
Wealth is probably the most important one. And it's the most important one because for this particular generation of Africans, it's the one that's the most material. Young Africans are, and I dare I have and presume upon myself the right to speak on their behalf, but my reading of it is that the average young African is quite concerned with the material state of their world and their material state in the world, right? And they don't accept that they belong to some third world construct about which they can't within which they can't thrive. So that would be the first. The second is that young Africans have proven themselves very capable. We go to the top universities in the world. We study all of the most advanced subjects, and we are able to hold our own with our counterparts from the rest of the world. So we're pretty clear that we're capable. And I think the question that now beckons is, if we are capable, then how does that capability translate into our ability to compete in the world? So that's been my fascination, my subject of study, and it's led me down this interesting path of trying to understand the cultures and population groups in the world that we look at and revere. What is it that they have in common? Look, one person observes something, it's a single person's observation. Two people observe it, then maybe they're in collusion. But when something becomes an unspoken truism, then there is something there that needs to be studied. And I'm just the guy who's going, I need to understand why this is. And so, yeah, that's why.
When apropos your point that Africans are demonstrating capability, Africans who immigrate or spend time in the United States dramatically outperform the native population, both black and white.
Yeah.
That's, it's a sociological observation that is inescapable and very disturbing to many people. But yes, it's a reality.
There's something there, right? And I think that if you think about the rise of migrant nations, these are nations whose economies are built off the back of migrant talent, right? And there are many of those around the world. Nations who, if you think today about how many nations have got these specialist work visas and these golden visas, it's because they've recognized and understood. And I think that the underlying answer to your question is that if I grew up in a desert country and I arrive in a country that is flush with water, right, my relationship with water is very different to the people who grew up in that country.
That's right.
And true too, if I grew up in a country where, you know, there are challenges around corruption and state infrastructure and state resources are not evenly distributed or efficiently managed, opportunities are either monopolized or corrupted, and I all of a sudden arrive in an environment where even if that is the case, it's nowhere near as pronounced as the place I come from, and there is better access to opportunities, state resources are more efficiently and more optimized, then I'm going to thrive because I've survived in a hostile environment. I'm definitely going to kick ass in this new environment. And I think that's a big part of the reason why, you see that kind of migrant outlier result in terms of how different population groups are able to contribute when they move to different countries.
And yet there must be profound cultural differences. Look, I have an emotional connection with Africa.
Right.
I sometimes joke with people here in the United States by saying I may be one of the most genuine African Americans you're likely to meet today.
Oh dear. That.
And so yes, I'm American, but I'm also African, and I think that there are aspects of a very healthy culture in Africa.
Sure.
And I contrast that. We were talking about immigrants from all parts of Africa to the United States who typically just do really, really well. But at the same time, France has just come out of a period of intense rioting and civic unrest. $1 billion worth of damage on the streets of France, several thousand people in police detention, and this is making France question the wisdom of importing millions of immigrants who were mostly North African origin and Moslem of religion. In general, I think it's fair to say that whether you look at France, Germany, Sweden, Norway, and Italy, this particular group has not been that effective at integrating, have not been particularly effective in enjoying the water, in being able to seize the economic opportunities that present themselves. So I think you've got to start off with the right culture. I'm not sure that everybody is equivalent and the same in this respect.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, far be it for me to comment on matters of immigration. It's by no means my area of expertise. But if I were to offer a layman's thought and perspective on this, I think that one of the challenges many parts of the world face is when they don't make the terms of immigration clear, right? So, you know, I I am based both in South Africa and in the Middle East. And I remember when I, really kind of embedded myself in the Middle East, in the Emirates, they were very clear about who they are. And they were very clear about who they are not. And they were very clear about the terms of living, existing, and contributing in their society.
Oh, very
Very
interesting. I
clear, right?
understand.
And you don't hear the rest of the world going, well, they're racist, because they're not. And you don't hear the rest of the world say, well, they are discriminatory, because they're not. What they are is abundantly clear on the values that they hold dear as a society, the structure of a society that works for them, and the various contributions the moving parts of that society are allowed to make. So what they're saying is, you can come here, but you don't leave where you're leaving. Get to come here because you've seen what we've done and then want to change it.
That's right.
If you like where you've come from, stay where you've come from, right? But if you like what we've built here, then you honor what it is that we built here. In fact,
I'm Rabbi Daniel Lapin. My friend, Pastor John Hagee, said this about my book, Buried Treasure, Life Lessons from the Lord's Language. Rabbi Lapin presents the hidden mysteries of the Hebrew language with a vibrant, electrifying force that reveals the unknown and brings a confidence that the Bible is indeed God's blueprint to life's greatest adventure. Are you ready to embark on your own journey? Begin your voyage of discovery today. But don't wait. The special discount offer won't last forever.
a good friend of mine who's high up in the offices of the government, I'll never forget, he said to me when I was getting my residency card, he said to me, this residency card has a couple of terms with it. One of them is that you stay out of our politics. So, and they are, they're a monarch, right? And so what he was saying was, don't come here with those crazy ideas of, we don't do that stuff here. You keep that where, if that works, stay there. But if you want to come here, you can work here, you can contribute here, you can create wealth here, and you can enjoy our society, but you enjoy our society. You don't get to change our society to reflect the society you come from. Sorry, let me just finish with this. And I do think that the pendulum of tolerance can swing too far. I know that's not a popular message in today's world of kumbaya and we're all in this together.
Yeah.
But the pendulum of tolerance can swing too far. We can be so tolerant of everything that we stand for nothing. And if you don't make terms abundantly clear, then people are going to push against the way of life as you have it, because you've not made clear that certain things are immutable, that they're immovable, and that those are embedded values of your culture.
Sadly, you are very accurately describing circumstances in the United States today. But what you were talking about in the Middle East and in the Gulf states in which you operate, it's back to contracts, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here's the deal. Here's what you may do, and here's what you may not do.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
If you follow our rules, here are the benefits you can expect. And if you don't, we are letting you know that that will not be an option.
I mean, I think that the US and I'm a distant YouTube student. So let me disqualify myself immediately before I make this statement. I'm a distant YouTube student of US politics, but I think one of the fascinations is one of the founding doctrines of the United States is give me liberty or give me death, right? And what we are learning today, or perhaps what the US is learning, is it can't be liberty at all costs, that there is a price too far to pay for this idea of Lady Liberty.
Yes.
And what the US is, I suppose, being forced to ask itself now is, what is the cost that we're willing to pay when we say, we are the land of the free? you can't be free of you. If you have freedom of choice, you can't be free of consequence. And I mean, I hasten to, I hesitate to share this, but I do think that the US is experimenting with things that parts of the world have experimented with and have found not to work, right? And she's testing it, and it's a very, very dangerous game. I think that it's a counterintuitive message in today's world. It's not a popular message in today's world, but a leader's role is not to be popular, it's to be effective. And a society's role is to preserve itself for the safety of its children. That's the role of society. And society should replicate a set of values that ensure that its offspring have the best opportunity at life.
Yes.
That's the role of society. And I hasten to say that the US is toying with both of those, and it's a very dangerous game. But again, I'm a distant YouTube student of watching what's happening.
Well, a distant YouTube student is also allowed to be 100% correct in my view. So, and if I can add just one thing to what you're saying, back to something we discussed earlier, being an orphan in time. When you cut people off from their society's past, destroy statues and monuments of the past, one of the reasons this is such an effective tool of tyrannical regimes is that when you isolate people from their past, they turn to you to shape their future.
That's right. Which is why dictators don't want their citizens believing in God, because they want to be God.
No, that's exactly right. And they also have to harm family, because people who have the strength of family have less dependency on centralized government. Away from these depressing topics.
Look, let me just say to you on this very, very quickly that in addition to that, I think you're 100% on the money, and I think one of the lessons of our modern day is that the old things are true, and it's such a silly lesson to learn, but the old things are true. The things your grandfather taught you were true. The values your grandparents raised you with were true, right? They are what sustained Homo sapiens. Whether you believe in the theory of evolution or not, they are what has sustained us over the extinction of many other species. We're still here. It's because there were values that have been passed down generation to generation, civilization to civilization, culture to culture, nation state to nation state, that have held true across time. And what we are doing again today is we're pulling at the elastic of these old things. And sadly, sometimes it's using pseudoscience to say things are what they are not. And the most insidious thing I'll say to you, Rabbi Lapin, is this: it's that for whatever reason, vice has become virtue. It's those who are sowing vice hide behind the virtue of victimization and then say, well, we're the victims here. No, you don't get to start a fight and then call yourself a victim.
Yes, that's right.
That's not quite the way that works, right? That's gaslighting. So, and even in the marketplace, I'm finding more and more that it really is up to those of us who hold a view to be clear about what that view is and what it is that we believe should be shaping the world, and how the world should be shaped around the future, in particular for the future of our children. So it's a very interesting time to be alive, no doubt.
It's a wonderful time to be alive, and also a wonderful time to be in a position, as you are, of significant influence.
Mm-hmm.
And in that context, let's try a thought experiment. If it doesn't get any traction between us, we'll drop it. But a thought experiment. 20 families come to you and they say, we each have a teenage child, shall we say 13 years old. We would like to leave them under your tutelage for the next 10 years. with the proviso that when they're 23, in 10 years' time, they are already on the road to successful living.
Right.
What do you do? You're in charge now.
So let me see if I frame the question. So I'm given carte blanche over raising children, and the idea is that I must raise them for the single outcome of what?
Of successful, happy living as adults when they hit 23. And their parents will agree to do any aspect of this that you stipulate. At the age of 23, they have to be in a position to live happy, fulfilling, successful lives.
The first thing I would do is I would make it abundantly clear that the foundational element of any meaningful life is serving a purpose, and that the only true way to connect to the purpose you serve is to connect to your true God. That's it. So none of this atheist nonsense. And I feel very strongly about this. As somebody I know who passed away recently, and one shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but this particular person was an atheist and had confessed themselves to be so. They enjoyed a public platform, which to me was problematic, because you then begin to share that with the rest of the world, right? In any event, they passed away quite suddenly, and at their memorial service, somebody was talking about how they've ascended to it. And I said, no, they haven't ascended anywhere. I didn't say it to myself. I didn't say it to them. They didn't ascend anywhere. You can't ascend to something you don't believe. You don't get to opt in and out. This is not it's not a casino. It's not a carnival. It's not an arcade. There's no 3 lives and then you die from the game of Pac-Man, right? So the first thing I would do is I would make sure that there is a foundational understanding of God. Foundational understanding of God.
Don't you? I mean, I think that much of your audience would be shocked that is your first prescription. You've got carte blanche. There's so many things that I think that your international audience, I think many people would be shocked to hear that from you. I'm even a bit surprised. Look, I think you're right. It's the first thing I would introduce as well. I don't know if we'll be on the same track moving through the rest of the program, but I would do that as well. But I would have thought most people would have said, well, the first thing he would say you got to do is make sure they, get a job or learn finance.
No, and the reason you want to start there is because when man, and read here, please, gender agnostic, I'm talking man in the species sense. When man lives only for his own self, man is dangerous. We've proven this. If there is a single lesson we learn from history, is that man who lives for himself is dangerous. He's directionless. He adds no value to society. He doesn't pass on a set of values to the next generation. And he tends to be extractive in his relationship with the world, right? So it is only in the fulfillment of a mandate that man has, that man begins to add value to society. That's literally what gives your life meaning. And so to raise children outside of the search of what that mandate is an incredibly dangerous social experiment. And I know there are parts of the world that are toying with it. It will not end well, right? There must be a fear and a reverence there must be a fear, a reverence, and a love of something greater than just your individual self. So that's why, for me, I would start there. We're
starting off with spiritual awareness as a word to just encapsulate everything we've been talking about.
The second thing I would then do is I would focus. I would truly focus them on learning the value of small tasks done exceptionally well. He's not popular now, but Will Smith in his book, Will, talks about this particular experience he had with his dad. His father was running an ice cream shop, and a wall had collapsed in, and his father said to him, "Fix the wall." And he was like, "But it's a wall." And he was a kid, I think as 9 or 11 years old. And he said to his dad, "How do I fix a wall?" And his dad said, "1 brick at a time." and that's a truism. That's a truism for how you build anything sustainable. The Great Wall of China was built 1 brick at a time. The pyramids of Giza were built one brick at a time. All the architectural marvels that we have in the world were built one brick at a time. And so one of the values to teach children, I think, living in the world today, is that this formula of instant gratification is incredibly dangerous, because you don't get to see the brick being laid every single day. It's about small tasks done with incredible diligence and a dedication to the outcome and painstaking attention to detail every single day, all day. That's what excellence is, right? It's not one big feat. It's the small thing done every day, consistently, diligently. That's what gives you the outcome that you want.
And
so,
whether it's building a business or being an effective parent and raising a family, it's not the once every 9 months or once every year huge, flamboyant, heroic gesture, but it's getting up every single morning and doing it right every day.
You got it.
The sequence of little things.
The third thing I would teach them is the value of money. Hard thing to teach, by the way. But I think that when one is able to connect effort to a particular outcome as it relates to money, it changes their relationship with it. So I would seek to find a way to teach them the value of money, whether it be, by getting them to do something through which there is an incentive system, and through that incentive system, they get points, and through the points they accumulate some money, and then they get to buy the things that they want, right? Some sort of holistic, outcomes-driven process approach that helps them understand that every single dollar and every single cent has a weight in sweat. When you see your mom or your dad or your grandparents having $100 in their pocket, that is weighted quite physically by the sweat of their brow.
Yes,
it didn't just appear. It was effort. In fact, money of itself, paper currency, is valueless. What truly gives money value is the effort it takes to create the value through which we extract in that money. I must tell you, I've such a hardened principle on this, that this is what's in my office today. It's given to me by a client, and it's a gift. I'll bring that close to you.
Reserve bankers. It's a Zimbabwe. That's a real Zimbabwean banknote. That's not a gift.
That's right.
$10 trillion. Yes.
$10 trillion.
That's what happens when a government abandons its primary responsibility of guarding the integrity of the currency. Hi, I'm Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Do you want to go on a treasure hunt? Let's journey through the Lord's language, Hebrew, with Buried Treasure. Buried Treasure reveals vital insights about love, happiness, faith, wealth, and more, drawn from my years of teaching and traveling. It's perfect for those who do not know any Hebrew. We've touched hundreds of thousands of lives. Are you ready to enrich your life? Discover the awesome power of God's chosen tongue with Buried Treasure, life lessons from the Lord's language.
Juxtapose that, then, would you, with this. 100 Zimbabwean dollars.
That goes back a few years.
Exactly. And then consider that the distance between these two was about a decade.
Gosh.
and I challenge anybody who as I said earlier, wants to experiment with dangerous things like socialism, because I don't think they understand what they're doing. And I do think those of us who see ourselves as operators in the marketplace, who understand the true value of creating value, we need to call that stuff out, because it's incredibly dangerous. So I would teach my children the value that there was a time the $100 could buy more than the $1 trillion.
Yeah.
And the difference between those two was just our relationship with time and money. Yes, people watching this will in the comment section say, yeah, but it was politics and sanctions. Yes. But at the heart of it, it gets down to leaders in charge who make a set of decisions within a given context, not recognizing what the consequences of those decisions are. As I said earlier, you have freedom of choice. You don't have freedom of consequences.
That's right.
And that is true of a person who can't swim jumping into the swimming pool, as it is of a president who can't lead seeking to run for office.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You spoke, and I don't remember if this was a speech or if it was a program, but you spoke about the difference between discipline and motivation. Is that ringing a bell?
Yes. I did indeed.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you develop that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure. So motivation is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Right. So and the way I think of it and the way I explain it is a motivation is understanding the motive behind the actions you take. Right. So motivation. What is the motive behind the actions you take? And but again, my obsession studying leaders and communities that outperform their time has been just trying to understand why do some there was a point in their journey where there was either no motivation or motivation did not matter, right? And the reason you know that to be true was because the set of forces they were against were so pronounced that they would have to mount an order of magnitude the effort to generate the motivation required to deal with those forces. I think here about Mahatma Gandhi fighting for the freedom of the people of India. I think here about, which then became India and Pakistan. I think here about Nelson Mandela, who birthed our own true democracy. There's just a point where motivation is not what's getting you to wake up in the morning and do the thing you need to do. Discipline is not sexy, it's not cool, it's not the thing that makes people feel good, but it's actually the thing that matters. It's the commitment to act regardless of how you feel. That's discipline. Whereas motivation is the action because of how you feel. Now, I think it was Eliud Kipchoge, who said, discipline is true freedom, because any person who lives by and acts against the whims of their emotions is a slave. You're a slave to your emotions. I feel great today, I do this. I don't feel great tomorrow, I don't do it. Discipline is not about how you feel. It's about what you committed to doing and getting it done. I mean, I want you to picture a Nelson Mandela who spends 26 years and some months behind bars fighting for the liberation of his people, who it was quite possible, would have been sentenced to capital punishment and death. And because they didn't want to make him a martyr, they then said, well, we'll put you in jail for the rest of your life. We talk about Nelson Mandela spending 27 years in prison, but it's not like they sentenced him to 27 years in prison. I want people to be clear on it. He was sentenced to life in prison.
Yeah, it was indefinite.
Yep. In prison, exactly. So it's not like he woke up every day going, one more day, and I got 27, and I got, I'm one day closer to 27 years. That's not what happened. He didn't even know when the end of the suffering would come. In fact, he didn't know if there would be an end of the suffering in his lifetime. But he was committed. And so the question we must ask ourselves is, how committed are you? Not how do you feel, because feelings will pass. How committed are you to the resolutions you've made, to the decisions you've made, to the commitments that you've made about yourself? How committed are you? Most of us fail at life because we don't simply have the integrity to honor the commitments we made to ourselves. That's really what it comes down to. And so what we do is, like a sugar high, we're constantly searching for the motivation. So it's the next TikTok video, it's the next Instagram video, it's the next YouTube video, we're constantly trying to throw in this sugar high of motivation, whereas actually what's required is diligence and consistency and discipline. Like I said earlier, the old things are true, right? The old things are true.
It's true not only for money and business, But exactly what you've described is equally true to marriage.
Yes.
I'm not true to my wife because I love her. I'm true to her because of commitment, a promise, and discipline.
Sure.
The love is a natural and inevitable consequence of that. But here in the United States, more and more young people are turning their back on building marriages and families because they don't feel like it.
Yeah.
And they don't.
As I said,
yeah.
I think living by the whims of your feelings is incredibly dangerous.
And that's
whatever it is you're doing in life, it's very dangerous.
Yeah, right. Look, I could talk to you for much longer, electricity power supplies allowing, but and I hope we'll have an opportunity to continue the conversation. We've really just scratched the surface. There's so many areas. My list of things I wanted to ask you, we've barely got through the first few lines of it. So I hope
let's do a follow-up, and we're certainly doing one on my platform as well. I'd love to have you on this. I think that I'm fascinated by religious men and men of religion. I'm fascinated by how you straddle the world when it seems as if the world, it seems to me, Rabbi, like there is a fight for the soul of the world. If I just, I'd like to consider myself fairly young. I'm sub 40, I'm 38 years old. I'm old enough to remember the very first digital device I ever owned. Young enough to remember when there were no cell phones around, not ubiquitously available. But I also am fairly, fluent in migrating the streets of the digital. Yeah, so I'm cool. I can live in both worlds. But if there is a single thing for me that worries me about the season we find ourselves in as humanity, I do think that there is a fight for the soul of the world. And I think that it is naive of us to believe that that fight exists only in the physical. I think that that fight exists in the spiritual. And I think that those of us who operate in the marketplace can't divorce ourselves from that fight, because that fight requires resources that we generate in the marketplace. And so an operator and a leader in the marketplace who is either devoid of their spiritual self or doesn't understand the context of the moment is actually an incredibly dangerous tool that can be used for a moment. And I'd love to get into your mind and understand some of the values that the everyday ordinary human being can live by, some of the principles and some of the truisms to become an effective and value-adding member of society in the world we're in today, where being honest and being truthful is just not in vogue. It's not cool. It's much better to be pleasant than to be honest. It's much better to be polite than to be purposeful. It's much better to be truthful
popular
than to be perceived. Or, yeah, that's exactly right. Much better to be popular than to be perceived to be honest. And I think that this is a moment that calls for that.
No, I think that's right, and I also think that that it's not even a challenge to straddle the two worlds, because they integrate very tightly. A purely materialistic and atheistic outlook would say that you and I are nothing more than about $10 worth of common chemicals put together in some cunning way. And then, we're
I love quantified it in dollars too.
Yeah, right. No, right. And that therefore every aspect of our lives is biologically and evolutionarily deterministic. But the problem is that's not reality. When people make buying decisions, they are using their irrational spirit as much as they're using their biological logic. And so
that's exactly right.
Somebody buys a shirt with some fancy designer's name on the lapel, that's not a utilitarian decision. It's a decision based on spiritual factors.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
logical. It's not providing you better shelter from the elements. It's not using fewer of your resources to acquire. But you're doing it anyways. Every time you buy a brand item, you are expressing essentially your spiritual nature.
I love that.
And there's so many examples of instances like that. So to me, it's not even a case of straddling two worlds. It's integrating the two worlds for a complete and accurate understanding of how everything really comes together and how everything really works.
I love that. Thank you, Rabbi. I would love that. So I'm going to set that up. I'm going to have you on my platform. We're going to have that conversation. You and I are going to have a full.
We shall continue. And until then, I wish you much success and happiness as you move onwards and upwards with all the many different orbits of your career in so many different parts of the world. So thanks for all you do. I'm very, very grateful because you're bringing truth and effectiveness and value into your audience. So great to be together with you today, and I do look forward to next time, Mr. Thembekwayo. Thank you.
L'chaim.
L'chaim to you. Be well.